My son told me to pay his wife's $500,000 debt, or kicked me out of my own house, so I disappeared overnight. I was folding towels on the couch when Josh walked in like he owned the place. Not just walking in, but announcing himself with that heavy pause he uses when he thinks he is about to say something important, something final. Bella followed him, arms crossed, lips already curled in that tight smile she wears when she thinks she has the upper hand. I remember thinking, just for a second, that they looked like strangers, standing in my living room, people who had memorized my house but forgotten me. Josh did not sit. He stayed standing, looming, like a man who did not intend to stay long. He said, "Mom, listen carefully. $500,000. You help Bella clear her debt, or you need to move out. Stop making this harder than it has to be." He said it calmly, like he was asking me to pass the salt. Bella let out a short laugh and said, "Why are you even holding on to this house? You are not going to live forever. Stop being selfish." I felt the word selfish land harder than the number he had just thrown at me. Josh shook his head and added, "Do not play the victim. You live here because we tolerate it. Do not forget that." The word tolerate rang in my ears. I had given birth to that voice. I had rocked it through fevers, fed it with overtime pay, and now it stood in front of me, telling me my presence was something endured. I stared at the folded towels in my lap, neat, quiet, obedient, everything I had been for most of my life. The shock was not the money. It was how easily my own son said, "Move out," as if throwing away a bag of trash. I looked at the doorframe, the one my late husband once measured for a family photo, and thought, this is my house, and yet I am being given an ultimatum inside it. Josh kept talking, explaining numbers and timelines, but I stopped hearing him. My mind caught on one sentence and would not let go. "Move out, not we need help, not can we talk, just move out." Bella sat down then, crossing her legs, already comfortable with the idea of me leaving. She said, "We are not asking for much. You should be grateful we are even letting you stay this long." I remember thinking how strange it was that gratitude had become a weapon. I wanted to say something sharp, something that would cut back, but my throat closed. I had learned long ago that silence was safer when people had already decided who you were. My son looked at me like I was a problem he was tired of managing. That was when it hit me that this was not about debt. It was about control. About 200 words into this moment, I realized I was not just telling my story for myself anymore. I was telling it for anyone who has ever been spoken to like this, in a place that once felt like home. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. Josh finally stopped and asked, "So what do you say?" His eyes were impatient, already annoyed that I had not answered quickly enough. Bella leaned back and added, "Do not drag this out. We have enough stress without you adding to it." That sentence did something to me. Enough stress without you. As if my existence was an inconvenience layered on top of their real lives. I thought about all the years I had swallowed my opinions to keep peace, all the times I had been careful not to offend, not to interfere, not to ask for too much. And still, here I was, being told I was too much. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because I needed them to believe I was small. Josh took my nod as surrender. He sighed in relief and said, "Good. We will figure out the paperwork tomorrow." Tomorrow, as if tomorrow was guaranteed to look the way he imagined. When they left the room, Bella brushed past me and said under her breath, "It is about time." I sat there long after they went upstairs, staring at the towels until they blurred together. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, the kind that follows a threat. I realized then that the ultimatum was not a negotiation. It was a declaration. They had already decided I was expendable. Standing up and shouting would not change that. Explaining myself would not soften it. What they did not know, what they never bothered to ask, was that I had spent my life preparing for moments exactly like this. Not with anger, but with foresight. I touched the arm of the couch and thought, this is my house, and if they think they can push me out of it, they have no idea who they are dealing with. I did not become someone they hated overnight. That hatred was built carefully, year by year, from moments that had nothing to do with cruelty and everything to do with refusal. The first crack appeared when Josh was 22 and convinced he had found a shortcut to adulthood. He came to me with excitement spilling out of him, talking fast, waving papers, explaining a business idea that changed shape every time he spoke. He wanted money, a large amount, and he wanted it immediately. I listened. I asked questions. The answers slid around instead of landing anywhere solid. I told him I loved him, but I would not give him that money. I said I had worked too hard to gamble it on something neither of us could clearly explain. His face changed. The warmth vanished. He shouted, "You do not believe in me." That sentence followed me for years. It did not matter that the plan collapsed within months, or that others lost money doing the same thing. What mattered was that I had said no. From that moment on, I was no longer a careful mother. I was labeled cold, unsupportive, the kind of woman who clutched her purse too tightly. Saying no had turned me into a villain. Years later came the wedding that everyone said I tried to ruin. Josh had met his first wife and fallen hard. He told me he needed money again, this time from my retirement fund, to make the wedding worthy of his future. I did not refuse right away. I asked to meet her. I listened more than I spoke. Something felt wrong, not dramatic, just quietly off. I did what I had always done. I checked facts. I found records of unpaid loans, different names used at different addresses, debts that seemed to vanish and reappear. I told Josh to slow down. I said we should wait, verify, protect ourselves. He exploded. "You are jealous," he said. "You cannot stand seeing me happy." The family echoed him. They said I was controlling, that I wanted to keep him small so I could feel important. Josh married her anyway. A few years later, the money was gone, and so was she. When the truth came out, no one apologized to me. No one said I had been right. Instead, they said I should have kept quiet. They blamed me for not stopping it harder, for not saving him from his own choices. Somehow, I was guilty whether I spoke or stayed silent. That was when I learned an important rule in our family. If something went wrong, it would always be easier to blame me than to admit a mistake. Bella arrived with confidence that filled every room. She liked admiration, collected it like proof of worth. From the beginning, she expected me to bend, to praise, to agree. I did none of those things. I was polite. I was reserved. I watched. That alone made her uneasy. She once asked me what I thought of her new car, the one bought on credit she could barely afford. I said gently that it was beautiful but expensive. That was all. No lecture, no judgment. Later, Josh told me Bella felt attacked. From then on, every word I said was twisted into criticism. If I stayed quiet, I was passive-aggressive. If I spoke, I was negative. Bella told people I looked down on her. She said I thought she was beneath me. The truth was simpler and crueler. I did not flatter her, and she could not forgive that. Over time, she turned Josh against me with small, careful comments. "Your mother does not like me. She thinks she is better than us." He wanted peace in his marriage, so he chose the version of reality that made that easier. The house became the final battleground. Years ago, Josh asked if he could put his name on the deed. He said it would help with taxes, that it was only a formality. I asked my lawyer. I learned what that formality could cost me. I said no. Josh smiled in front of me and raged behind my back. He told relatives I did not trust him, that I was selfish, that I feared he would take what was mine. No one asked why a son needed to be on his mother's deed while she was still alive and healthy. No one questioned why love had to be proven through paperwork. They accepted his version because it was easier. It painted me as a woman clinging to control instead of a woman protecting herself. From that point on, every boundary I set became evidence of my supposed cruelty. Looking back, I see how neatly it all fits together. I was hated because I would not serve as an endless source of money, approval, or silence. I did not disappear when it was convenient. I did not sacrifice myself fast enough or loudly enough. In a family that measured love by how much you gave up, I was dangerous because I kept parts of myself intact. Josh and Bella did not resent me for doing something wrong. They resented me because I could not be easily moved, easily guilted, easily used. And when people decide they want what you have, they must first convince themselves that you do not deserve it. By the time they demanded the house and the money, they had already rehearsed their justifications for years. I was not a mother anymore. I was an obstacle. And obstacles, in their minds, exist to be removed. The dinner was not planned for warmth. Bella invited 2 people she knew would make me careful with my words, her cousin Marlene and a neighbor named Rick, who laughed too loudly and agreed with whoever spoke last. The table was set neatly, almost ceremonially, as if this were an occasion worth remembering. I noticed the papers placed beside Josh's plate, aligned, waiting. Bella poured wine for everyone except me, and said with a smile that did not reach her eyes, "Let us eat first, then we will talk like adults." I understood then that this was not a family meal. It was a hearing. As plates clinked and forks moved, Bella began softly. "Joanne, you know, when someone lives under a roof, they have responsibilities." She glanced at Marlene, who nodded. Bella continued. "You cannot just take and take because you are old." The word old hung there, naked and intentional. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Josh cleared his throat and said, "Mom, please do not embarrass me. Sign the papers. Do you want to tear this family apart?" He slammed his hand on the table, hard enough to rattle the glasses. Rick whistled under his breath like he was watching a show. Bella leaned forward, eyes bright, and said, "If you really loved your son, you would pay the debt. If you refuse, you are not a victim. You are a mother who enjoys destroying happiness." I felt heat rush to my face, not from shame, but from the cruelty of being reduced to a transaction. I remembered Josh at 7, asking me if monsters were real, and here he was, repeating words that cut more cleanly than anything I had ever heard. They spoke about me as if I were not there, listing my supposed faults, how I always held back, how I never trusted anyone, how I had made Josh's life harder by not sacrificing enough. The hypocrisy was sharp. For years, Josh had asked me to give and give for the sake of family, to be patient, to be quiet, to understand. Now that I asked for something simple, respect, they called it selfishness. I realized with a cold clarity that they were not angry at me for refusing to help. They were angry because my refusal exposed how dependent they were on taking. Around the 200th word of their accusations, I felt a strange steadiness settle in my chest. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. Bella slid the papers toward me. "Just sign. Stop acting like this is dramatic." Josh stared at me with that look he used when he was tired of waiting for obedience. "Mom, do not make me choose," he said, even though he already had. The room felt smaller, not because of the people, but because of the certainty with which they believed they were right. Marlene said gently, "Sometimes elders have to step aside for the next generation." That was when it clicked. I was not a mother to them anymore. I was an asset that had overstayed its usefulness. I thought of all the times Josh had told me, "We are family," whenever he needed something, and how quickly that word vanished when I needed dignity. My heart did not break then. It hardened. I looked at Josh and saw calculation where affection used to be. I saw a man measuring the value of his own mother against a balance sheet. That was the moment I understood silence could be sharper than any argument. I did not cry. I did not plead. I nodded once, slowly, carefully, as if agreeing with a doctor's diagnosis. Josh exhaled, relieved, and said, "Good, I knew you would come around." Bella smiled like a verdict had been reached. They mistook my nod for surrender, for weakness, for the final collapse of an old woman who had been cornered. They did not see what that nod truly was. It was the sound of a door closing inside me, a quiet decision forming with perfect clarity. I folded my napkin, placed it on the table, and said nothing more. In that silence, they celebrated too early, unaware that the trial they had staged would be the last moment they ever controlled the outcome. The morning after that dinner, Josh did not knock. He walked into the kitchen like the night before had settled everything. Bella followed him, carrying a folder pressed flat against her chest, her posture straight, her face calm in the way people look when they believe the fight is already won. I was pouring coffee when Josh set the folder down on the table with a soft thud and said, "Let us get this done quickly. I have meetings." He flipped it open and slid a single page toward me, the signature line glaringly empty. "Just sign. Do not make this harder than it needs to be." Bella stood behind him, arms crossed, watching my hands instead of my face, like a guard making sure a prisoner did not bolt. I read the heading slowly. It was written in careful language meant to look harmless, words like authorization and convenience and temporary authority. But I knew better. I had learned long ago that the most dangerous documents never shout, they whisper. Josh tapped the paper with his finger. "It is standard, just a formality, so we can manage things." He used that word again, formality, the same word he had used years ago when he wanted his name on the house. Bella leaned in and said, "If you do not sign, we will change the locks. You can stay somewhere else. A nursing home might be more appropriate." She said it without anger, as if suggesting a restaurant. That was when the truth sharpened into focus. This was not about helping Bella with debt. This was about ownership, about erasing me one signature at a time. This was about ownership. They wanted the house, not temporarily, not partially, but fully, so they could tighten the grip and never loosen it again. I felt a strange calm wash over me as I traced the empty signature line with my eyes. They believed I was cornered. They believed age had softened me into compliance. Josh sighed loudly and said, "Mom, I do not have time for this. Just sign." There was impatience in his voice, the kind reserved for service workers who move too slowly. Bella added, "Do not be dramatic. You will still live here, if you behave." The word behavior told me everything. They were not asking for help. They were establishing terms. At that moment, I saw the plan clearly. First the signature, then the debt, then the slow erasure of my authority, my voice, my place. I would exist in the house only by permission, until one day permission was withdrawn entirely. My eyes drifted from the paper to the window, to the spot where my husband used to stand every morning, coffee in hand, watching the light change. His voice came back to me, not loudly, not urgently, but steady and prepared. He had said, years ago, "If anyone ever asks you for the house, do not argue, do not explain. Just do what we planned." At the time, I had laughed, told him he worried too much. Now I understood he had seen further than I had. I looked back at Josh and Bella, two people who spoke about me as if I were already gone, and I realized arguing would only give them more material to paint me as difficult. Resistance would make them crueler. Compliance, or the appearance of it, would make them careless. "I need a night," I said quietly. Josh frowned. "A night for what?" he snapped. "You have nothing to think about. You are old." The word landed exactly where Bella wanted it to. Old meant slow. Old meant confused. Old meant pliable. Bella nodded in agreement and said, "Do not drag this out. We have been patient enough." I met Josh's eyes and saw no hesitation there, no flicker of doubt, only the expectation that I would fold like I always had. That was when I decided not to fight them in the way they expected. I pushed the paper back across the table, gently, as if it were fragile. "One night," I repeated. "That is all I am asking." Josh scoffed and gathered the folder. "Fine," he said, "but do not test us." Bella smiled thinly, already imagining the locks being changed, the control finally complete. As they left the room, I stayed seated, my coffee growing cold in my hands. The house felt different now, not unsafe, but exposed, like a place where a storm had been announced but not yet arrived. I did not cry. I did not panic. I simply stood, walked to my bedroom, and opened the drawer where I kept papers no one ever bothered to look for. That night I would not be sleeping. I would be remembering, and when morning came, I would no longer be available for negotiation. By late afternoon, Bella decided patience was no longer useful. I heard the unfamiliar click at the front door before I saw the man standing there with a toolbox. He looked uncomfortable, eyes darting between Bella and me. She spoke quickly, confidently, the way people do when they want others to stop thinking. "We just need to test the lock," she said. "There have been security concerns." I stepped forward and said calmly, "This is my house." Bella did not even look at me. She waved a hand and said, "She is confused. Please, just do your job." The word confused was deliberate. Josh stood behind her, arms crossed, avoiding my eyes. The locksmith hesitated. Bella leaned closer to him and whispered something I could not hear, then turned to me and said, "If you interfere, we will call the police and report trespassing." Trespassing, in the home where I had lived for decades. The absurdity of it should have been laughable. Instead, it hollowed me out. The man left without touching the lock, muttering apologies. Bella was irritated now, sharp-edged. She marched past me into the bedroom without asking, pulling drawers open, tossing clothes aside. "We need space," she said. "You have too much junk." I followed her slowly, each step heavier than the last. She grabbed a box from the closet, the one where I kept my husband's letters, the watch he wore every day, the folded flag from his funeral. She lifted it like it weighed nothing and dropped it into a plastic bin with a loud crack. Something inside me broke then, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. "Please," I said, my voice barely there. She turned, annoyed. "What?" she snapped. "What is so important in there?" I knelt and reached for the box, my hands shaking, and she laughed. "You are still clinging to the past. That is your problem." Josh finally spoke, his tone irritated rather than concerned. "Mom, stop making a scene. You are acting like you own the place." I looked up at him, at the boy whose lunches I had packed before dawn, whose fevers I had sat through counting breaths, and I said nothing. Bella stepped closer and said, "Own? What do you even contribute? You just sit here surrounded by memories. You do not build anything." Josh nodded as if that made sense to him. "Mom, please, just cooperate." Bella's voice dropped, cold and precise. "Owner, do not be ridiculous. You are almost expired." The word expired sliced through me in a way I did not know words still could. Not dying, not aging, expired, like milk forgotten in the back of a fridge. As they spoke, my mind drifted backward without my permission. I saw myself at 30, working 2 jobs, coming home after midnight to iron Josh's clothes so he would not be teased. I remembered skipping meals so he could have new shoes when his soles wore thin. I remembered holding his head when he vomited through the night, whispering that everything would be okay, even when I was not sure it would be. I remembered choosing him over myself every single time, not because I had to, but because that was what love looked like to me. And now he stood there watching his wife tear through my life as if it were clutter. He did not stop her. He did not look ashamed. He looked relieved that someone else was doing what he had wanted to do himself. Bella shoved another armful of my things into the bin. "We will move these to the garage," she said, "or throw them out. Depends on my mood." Josh glanced at his phone, uninterested. "Mom, please. This is exhausting." Exhausting. That was what I was to them now. Not a mother, not a person, a problem to be managed until removed. I felt a strange clarity settle over me, like the moment before a long dive. Arguing would only give them the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. Crying would confirm their story that I was weak. I bent down, picked up the watch Bella had knocked loose, and held it in my palm. It was cold, solid, real, unlike everything they were saying. I stood, walked past them without a word, and went into my room. I closed the door gently and locked it. On the bed, I placed a single suitcase and opened it. I did not rush. I chose carefully. Not everything, just what mattered. This was not an escape. It was a withdrawal. I was not running from them. I was stepping away from a battlefield they had already poisoned. Outside the door, I could hear Bella's voice, sharp and triumphant, already planning my absence. I zipped the suitcase closed and sat on the edge of the bed, my hands steady for the first time all day. They thought they had stripped me of power. What they did not understand was that they had just given me something far more dangerous. They had given me permission to leave without guilt. I waited until the house settled into its shallow nighttime breathing. The rain had started quietly, the kind that does not announce itself, just a thin tapping against the windows like someone checking if you are awake. I moved through the rooms without turning on lights, not because I was afraid of being seen, but because I no longer felt the need to be visible. I carried my suitcase to the kitchen table and laid out what I needed with deliberate care. Old papers first, the ones no one ever reads because they look boring and smell like time. Deeds, statements, letters written in ink that does not fade easily. Then the sealed envelope, thick and heavy, addressed in my husband's handwriting, the one he told me never to open unless I had to. Finally, I picked up the small object I had set aside earlier, his watch, the one Bella had almost thrown away. I slipped it into my coat pocket and felt its weight settle there, familiar and grounding. I did not write a long goodbye. I did not explain. Explanation invites argument, and I was done negotiating my existence. I took a single sheet of paper and wrote, "Do not look for me. I need quiet." I placed it in the center of the kitchen table where they would not miss it. For a moment, I stood there, looking at the chair where Josh used to sit doing homework, the spot where my husband used to read the paper. The house did not feel like mine anymore, but it did not feel like theirs either. It felt paused, like a sentence waiting for its ending. I locked the door behind me softly, the sound swallowed by the rain, and stepped into the night. The air was cold enough to sting, sharp enough to wake me fully. As I walked down the driveway, I did not look back. That surprised me. I had always imagined leaving would hurt more, that it would tear something loose inside me. Instead, there was a strange lightness, the kind that comes when a long-held breath is finally released. I got into the car, placed the envelope on the passenger seat, and drove without a destination, trusting the road to carry me somewhere quiet. By the time my phone buzzed, I was already gone in the way that matters. Josh texted first, "Where are you going? Do not be childish." I read it at a red light and felt nothing. The word childish had lost its power. Bella's message came a few minutes later. "Good. The house already feels lighter." I imagined her saying it aloud, satisfied, certain that absence meant defeat. I did not reply to either of them. I had learned that silence, when chosen and not forced, could become a boundary more solid than any wall. I parked near a small motel on the edge of town, the kind of place people pass without noticing. Inside, the room was clean and anonymous. I placed the suitcase on the bed, set the envelope on the desk, and sat down without turning on the television. I took the watch from my pocket and held it for a moment, remembering my husband's voice, his calm certainty. He had believed in preparation, not confrontation, in patience, not panic. That night, I finally understood why. I did not disappear because I was scared. I disappeared because I needed distance to let their assumptions do the work for me. They believed I was running. They believed age had finally overwhelmed me. They would grow careless, confident, loud. People always do when they think they have won. I lay down fully dressed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain fade. Somewhere behind me, my phone buzzed again and then went quiet. I did not check it. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to think. I was not erasing myself. I was stepping out of the frame so the truth could come into focus. I was not gone. I was simply no longer where they could reach me. And in that absence, they would sign their own sentence without ever realizing I had handed them the pen. I did not go to the lawyer in anger. I went in silence, carrying facts instead of emotions. The man my husband had trusted all those years ago still worked in the same modest office, his hair grayer, his eyes sharper. When he saw me, he did not ask why I was there. He only said, "You waited until it mattered." I handed him the envelope my husband had sealed years before and said, "They tried to take the house." He nodded once, as if this outcome had always been a possibility. We opened the trust together, page by page, and for the first time since I left, I felt something close to relief. Not because of revenge, but because everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. The trust was clear and precise. My husband had never believed in ambiguity. It stated that the house was protected under a living trust designed to safeguard me from financial coercion. If anyone attempted to force me out, threaten eviction, change locks, or pressure me into signing away authority, Ownership would automatically transfer to a designated charitable foundation supporting elderly women who had experienced financial abuse. No court hearing, no appeal. The moment coercion was documented, the transfer was triggered. I slid my phone across the desk, showing the lawyer the messages Josh had sent, the voicemail where Bella mentioned changing locks, the locksmith invoice she had foolishly emailed herself. The lawyer listened quietly, then smiled, not warmly, but with professional satisfaction. They did everything required to activate the clause, he said, without knowing it. Then he showed me the second provision, the one my husband had added later. It was labeled a moral condition, written in plain language. If any beneficiary attempted to pressure, deceive, or intimidate me into signing documents related to the property, that person would forfeit all ancillary benefits tied to the trust. Not just the house, everything. The garage access. The vintage car my husband had kept running for decades, even the small contingency fund set aside for Josh's emergencies, all of it vanished the moment coercion occurred. I closed my eyes briefly, thinking of Josh tapping the paper, telling me to hurry, telling me I was old. My husband knew. He had seen how easily entitlement grows teeth. The lawyer sent the notices that afternoon. I did not watch him do it. I did not need to. By evening, my phone buzzed with a number I recognized but did not answer. Then another, then a voicemail. Josh's voice was unsteady, stripped of authority. "Mom, there has to be a mistake. This cannot be right." A text followed seconds later. Frantic. "The house is not ours? Call me now." Bella's reaction came louder, angrier, through a string of messages that blurred together. "You tricked us. This is fraud. You planned this." I read them calmly, sitting in a chair by the motel window, the rain finally gone. They mistook preparation for deception. They mistook silence for ignorance. That was their final error. By morning, the formal letter arrived at the house. I knew because Josh called again, his voice breaking this time. "They say the property belongs to a foundation now. They say we have no claim. How is that possible?" I imagined him standing in the living room, papers shaking in his hands, the same room where he had told me to move out. Bella must have been screaming. I could hear it in the background, her voice sharp with panic. "She set us up," she shouted. She pretended to be weak. The truth was simpler. I had never pretended. They had projected weakness onto me because it made their actions easier to justify. The foundation's representative contacted them next, polite and firm, outlining the transition process. They were given timelines, instructions, and boundaries. Everything was legal. Everything was documented. Josh lost more than the house that day. He lost every fallback he had assumed would always be there. No garage, no car, no emergency fund, no inheritance buffer to soften the consequences of his choices. Bella's fury had nowhere to land but on him, and for the first time, he could not redirect it toward me. I did not call them. I did not explain. There was nothing left to clarify. They had activated every safeguard my husband and I had put in place, step by step, through their own arrogance. They finally understood that I had not been powerless. I had been patient. I had listened. I remembered. And when the moment came, my signature was not needed. My absence was enough. They did not have to drag Josh and Bella out in handcuffs. That would have been too loud, too theatrical, and this story never needed noise. 2 representatives from the foundation arrived instead. Polite, composed, carrying folders the way people carry certainty. They spoke calmly, outlining timelines, occupancy limits, and the transition process. Josh tried to argue, his voice rising, pointing at walls like ownership could be reclaimed through memory. Bella paced, furious, insisting there had to be a mistake, that family meant something. The representatives listened without reacting, then repeated the same sentences with the same calm. The outcome did not change. The house no longer belonged to them. It did not belong to me either. It belonged to a cause that understood what financial abuse looked like when it wore a family's face. Josh called me that evening. I recognized the number and almost did not answer, not out of fear, but because I had already said everything that mattered with my actions. Still, I picked up. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Mom," he said, the word trembling. "Did you really do this?" I waited a moment before answering, not to punish him, but to let the silence speak first. "No, Josh," I said evenly. "You did. You were the one who said pay the debt or get out. You were the one who talked about changing locks. You were the one who called me a burden." He tried to interrupt, but I continued, my voice steady. "I did not take anything from you. I stepped aside and let your choices finish what they started." There was a long pause, then a sound like he was swallowing something bitter. "We are losing everything," he said. I replied, "You lost it the moment you decided I was expendable." I ended the call gently, before anger could crawl back into the space I had cleared. I did not go back to the house. I did not stand across the street to watch them pack boxes or argue or blame each other. That kind of witnessing would have tied me to them again, and I was done being tied. Instead, I wrote a letter, short and clean, the kind of letter that does not invite response. "I have paid the greatest debt of my life," I wrote, "the debt of staying silent to keep the peace. From today on, I owe you nothing." I sent it without a return address. That was not cruelty. That was closure. Weeks passed. I settled into a small apartment with windows that faced east, where the morning light arrived quietly and left no shadows behind. No one raised their voice there. No one walked in unannounced. I placed my husband's watch on the bedside table, not as an anchor to the past, but as a reminder of foresight rewarded. I cooked when I wanted, rested when I needed, and spoke only when my words would be met with respect. The silence in that place was not heavy. It was kind. Sometimes I thought about Josh, about the boy he had been before entitlement taught him to measure love in leverage. I did not wish him harm. I wished him understanding, even if it came too late to repair what he had broken. Bella faded from my thoughts more quickly. Power loses its shine when it can no longer be used, and she had built herself on that shine alone. Their absence did not leave a hole. It left the room. One afternoon, sitting by the window, I realized something that surprised me. I was breathing differently. Not shallow, not cautious, not waiting for the sound of footsteps in the hall. I was breathing like a woman who belonged to herself. Justice had not arrived with shouting or spectacle. It had arrived quietly, through preparation, memory, and the refusal to be erased. I did not win by taking anything back. I won by walking away with my dignity intact, leaving behind a house that was no longer a battlefield and a family that had forgotten how to be one. Some people call that revenge. I call it survival done right. If you are still here, thank you for listening to me all the way to the end. I did not tell this story to be praised or pitied. I told it because silence can break a woman faster than cruelty, and because too many mothers are taught that enduring abuse is the same thing as love. It is not. Love does not threaten. Love does not demand ownership. Love does not call you a burden and expect you to disappear quietly. I am Joanne, and this was my truth. I did not raise my voice. I did not seek revenge. I simply remembered who I was and acted before it was too late. If my story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your own mother, your grandmother, or even yourself, then it has done what it needed to do. Here on Grandma True Stories, we give voice to women who were told to stay quiet, to endure, to fade away. We remember, we speak, and we show that wisdom does not expire with age. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, please subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Your support helps these voices travel farther than they ever could alone. And if you carry a story of your own, one you were told was too small or too late to matter, know this: it still matters. And when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens.